Welcome to our third panel at the Keep of the Borderlands, Amtgard Leadership University, where we're going to be talking about arts and sciences judging. Obviously, it's well timed since they've got Olympiad at this one. What I'm going to ask each of the panel members to do is do a quick introduction, let us know who you are, give me a quick qualifier, why are you on the panel, and then a little bit of insight as far as what you think of when you consider or you're talking about A&S judging, and we're going to use that to base the further conversations on. Okay, so...
So I'm Diana Starfall, Serpent Knight of Golden Vale, the Principality of the Northern Empire, and I won Cultural Olympian twice. So that is why I believe I am here today.
My name is Promethea. I'm from Falcon's Rest in Golden Vale, also under the Northern Empire. I just recently got my 10th dragon and am my kingdom's Dragon Master.
I'm Dame Jinx from the Rising Winds. I am a Crown Knight. I've run multiple qualification tournaments as well as assisting running Dragon Master tournaments with my regents.
Sir Raphael, 17th Four-Belted Knight of Amtgard, Arts and Science Guru of Polaris, and always a bridesmaid, never a bride in Olympiad.
Okay. So, Diana, we're going to start with you. How do you handle low scores? And you believe it might be because judges just don't understand your medium.
To clarify, is that when I get low scores or when I see my entrants getting low scores in a tournament I'm running?
Sure. Those are good questions. Let's go with those.
Okay, so on the personal side of things, when I see a low score, first thing I do is I look at the comments and I want to know what exactly are they taking issue with, what are the criticisms, what are the feedback, how can I grow from it, if there's something I can take away from it, even if the score's low, at least I can learn something and move on. Generally, I find that there's a high score to counter it, and there's usually an outlier on the other end. As far as when I see my entrants getting low scores, actually, it's something that we kind of talked about today. We were debating whether we were going to be dropping high-low. And we looked at the outliers, and we saw that in a couple cases there was as much as a 4-point outlier between the low score and the high score. And so we started to say, well, maybe it's time to drop high-low. The median seems to be pretty much around the same score. And then we looked at how much the outlier was below the average and how low the low was below and how high the high was above. And it was actually almost the same distance in every case. So we realized that maybe you had one expert who's very harsh in their field, and maybe you had someone who wasn't as experienced who just said, wow, that looks really great. And so we decided that we were going to keep the average because it really did reflect over 5 different people from places all over the kingdom and all over the game what the norms are in their regions. So we decided to actually keep with the average. One of the things we're doing this year is high accountability, so we're also going to make sure that you can follow up with your judges. So I think that's ultimately what I'd want to see, is that if you're going to have those low scores, make sure the judge is willing to put their name on it and talk to the person after. And that's the best way to combat that.
Okay. Promethea, this is where I should go down the line.
I can't add too much more to that. I think judge accountability is big, and I think one of the problems that I've had in the past is when you get scores back as an entrant, if you don't know, if there's no commentary, there's no way to know how harsh that score really is. And it could be that your work wasn't as good as something else in your field, or it could just be that person really knew what they were talking about. So accountability, I think, is the biggest, and making sure your judges are available and that comment cards get passed out or comment spreadsheets get passed out really soon after is probably the best way to deal with that.
Jinx?
I can't really add any more to that.
Okay. So let's just talk about A&S judging in general. Okay. Earlier in one of the panels, the Regent panel, we talked about how challenging it can be to find a judge. How do you find judges? We're going to start off with you, Jinx.
Generally, I start looking at the people who have entered recently and done really well. People who've been active recently in their fields, I like to maybe see if they'd be willing to have one tournament where they sit out, so that they can help provide the commentary that other people need to help improve their crafts.
Okay. For me?
I say it's a really good thing to do. Having there's usually knights in your area who are more active than others too, or people in the right path, and you can usually find people and be like, can you do this, or will your family do this, or do you know somebody? A friend of a friend works out really well for a lot of stuff like that.
Okay. Raphael?
I gave this answer earlier, and I'm going to stick with it. If I'm looking for judges, especially for crown calls, I'm going to look at people who've also qualified in the past. I want people who have hydras because they've gone through this before, and they know what's up. They have an idea of what a 3.0 should feel like.
Okay. Diane?
I'll also take kind of a poll and get a feel for who's going to be entering. So if I know that I have certain archetypes that are coming in, I know that I've got someone doing digital, I know that I've got someone doing a piece of programming, I know that I've got cooking. I make sure that I have the kinds of judges at least reflected once on the panel so somebody can speak to the medium. Just because, especially in our kingdom, we've got a lot of people doing really unique, different things, and you need at least one person who can speak to that. Because if you have a couple judges that are low, at least you'll have someone else who knows what they're talking about.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the battle game in the background is going really well, and they're all having fun with that amazing castle. So please do me a favor and just speak up a little bit better, so whenever we edit it, we're better off, and everybody back there can hear it. Okay. So, ANS judges. Obviously, we're not going to go through each of the categories. Broadly, let's talk about you serving as a judge. What do you look for whenever it's time that you responded to the call to serve as a judge? Promethea?
I think the most important thing, like for me personally, going in like being a judge, the most important thing is like you want to look for, like you want to try as much as you can to get people's cards in order. Because the most important thing that I'm looking for is I'm looking for a bit of a description. I'm looking for a little, like if I don't understand the medium, I'm looking for help understanding the medium because I want to give a fair score. And if you bring me something and you're like, this was made, like this was forged, and that's all it says. As a judge, if I don't have an expert judge on the panel with me, that's the kind of thing that I want to start finding. And I think a lot of groups overlook that. I get a lot of, like the questions I get asked the most often are, how do I fill out a card and what do judges need to know? And I think that can really make or break how entries are perceived a lot of the time.
Okay. Diana, what's some of the stuff you look for?
I try to take a really whole view. I'll start with looking at the card and picking out design and concept. Did they accomplish what they set out to do? I'm looking at things like how did they categorize their piece, because we've got a lot of things like jewelry and belts that can fit into a lot of different places. So what do they want me focusing on? You look at your aesthetic and your construction, but also I really take into consideration scope and scale. So if you're entering a really impeccable, beautiful applique T-tunic, that's wonderful. But if you want to get the really high-end scores, I'm looking for sets of garb. I'm looking for pants and slough coat and hat, accessories, something to make that more of a complete unit, because we're a sport LARP and we have a lot of people who do really exceptional T-tunics. That has become an average. So I'm looking for how do you get above that.
Okay. Raphael.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat it?
As a judge, what are some of the key things, the first things you're looking at whenever you walk up on an item?
Craftsmanship. You can't teach that. I mean, you can, but it's hard to be like, okay, did you finish the seam? Did you clip the thread? How is it presented? Is your picture framed? And part of it is, does it look nice? And it's like, how do you teach that aesthetic? All right, because we're fantasy based too. You may have one judge who has a bias, maybe because they have a flair for the SCA and they want to be a period purist, and that's really hard here. The other thing is that, does it fit the category? And you have a flow chart in your head. All right, if I'm looking at a hat and it's entered in fighting garb, does it fit the category? All right, I've been to a Crown Calls where I saw somebody put 6 hats or a hat in 6 different categories. So the same hat, and it's like the garb accessory one scored really well. The feast garb one, the fighting garb one, the passive construction one didn't, because they don't fit the bill. You've already entered that in something else. So that's where it starts. So it fits the bill. Does it fit the bill? If it doesn't, why not? Would this be the poster child of what not to make, or would this be the one that you tell everybody else, go look at that? That's what a fighting tunic is, and that's where I start.
Okay, Jinx.
I just really look at presentation is a big part of it. What I look for. The other thing I look for is I kind of look out and see what has become the average in my kingdom, because it's a fluctuating thing. So as you score things, you have to take into account what everyone, like the levels that everyone's going to be on.
Okay.
I don't know.
So,
I'm way in the deep end here.
That's a great point, because you and Diana both talked about how you look at the average. A tunic is a tunic is a tunic. But what about whenever I consider myself a technician of the trade? How do I draw attention to the fact that sure, it's a tunic, but don't let that distract you from the quality of it being a tunic. How do I draw attention to that if that's my goal?
That's where cards come in again. Like you've got to, if you write down, if it's something that you are good at and you are like, you consider yourself a technician or an expert in your field, write down on the card why I should like, what makes the seams on this tunic better than another tunic, and how am I going to know that? Because you can't assume that your judges are always going to be top quality, like people who place an Olympiad. You have to assume that they're going to be people who are going to look at this and be like, what a great tunic, and then leave. Like the descriptions that you put down are really, really, really key, and making sure that you tell people as much as you can do, depending on the entry. Touch it, turn it inside out. Can we put it on the model? Can we put it on the person? Be able to actually work with it so you see how it's supposed to be used.
Okay. Anybody want to add?
Well, if you're a technician, you also have to, and kind of to riff off what Promethea is saying, is if you're a technician and what you're doing is better than the average, tell me exactly, but also, I'm trying to think of words.
Go ahead.
I had this thought and it was really great and it was going to take it to the next step. And going on with the idea of why is that, like if you're going to give me detail, we were talking about entry cards and how entry cards were getting really long in this event. This year, people wrote us novels, and some of the novels were really great. And there's a difference between a useful novel and a useless novel. And I want to know if you're doing a French seam, but if you're doing a 1/4 inch French seam versus an 1/8 inch versus a 1/2 inch, if what you've done is structurally more sound than another, tell me exactly what it is, why, and point it out so you're drawing attention to the areas. Because you can say, yes, I worked, 32 hours on this. That doesn't tell me enough. But I also don't want you to be spelling out, this is linen, so I ironed it with a medium setting, and I cut it with pinking shears before I serged it. Like, I don't want to know I want to know the differences, not the detail, not the process.
It helps to think of it like a news brief. If you're going to hand that over to somebody else, you want them to be able to go down, okay, it's a 1/8 inch seam, which I trimmed like this, and then you want to go to the next part, and all the technical details should be spelled out. It should be like an information sheet for a new piece of electronics. You get all of the things to break down.
But so why should the judge care?
Yes.
Don't just tell them how you did it, but maybe tell them why it's important that you did it. And if it's not important, maybe edit that out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what I'm getting?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to say yes with that, but sometimes you have judges who won't know what a French seam is. So I include that. I include a glossary in my write-ups because I am afraid I'm going to have that judge who just does not know. So I'd rather give too much information. If you know what it is, awesome. You don't have to go any farther. But you have to plan for the unfortunate, to where what if you have a judge who's just going to look at it and say, I bet all 4 of us could make a black tunic, make a tunic out of just black, no designs, no nothing. We'll have 4 different tunics, and they will get scored epically different. And it's a great idea for a challenge.
And
really
then
would
take
be.
that challenge to all of the different kingdoms.
The black tunic
and
challenge.
See how the
And
tunics do in each kingdom.
That would
so-
be super cool.
Yeah.
Plan.
I really
Yeah.
like that idea,
Yeah.
actually.
So do I.
Well, I believe Olympiad is going to be at West March. So if the 4 of you want to make
a year
black
away.
tunics,
That's very far.
well, don't complain you didn't know. So if you want to
I'm
enter,
already
but
thinking
Jinx,
about
you want
tickets.
to,
trust me.
What was the question? I got distracted. Sorry. Why should judges care?
how do I draw attention
Oh.
to the technical?
Technical difficulty.
I think if it's something that, like, I'm kind of torn because I kind of have to go with Raphael on this one, where you never know what the judges are going to know. So you have to make sure that the information is at least there, whether it's a glossary, like on the back, like a list of just quick reference terms or whatever. But if it makes a technical difference or a mechanical difference in your item, or you had to cook something in a certain way for it to work that way or whatever, like, you should explain that.
There's a difference between that and directions, I think, maybe what Diana was getting at. right?
Yeah.
Well, and I just had a brainchild because I remembered something that happened this weekend that I really loved. Something new that some people are starting to do a lot of is submitting visuals with their entries. And there were a couple of folks who actually had just a photo book of process. And so I didn't have to read anything. I didn't have to go through lots of description, but it was very specific. These are the pictures of the stages of what I went through. And it gave me an instant idea of exactly what happened. I didn't have to delve too deep, and I didn't need to know the technical terms myself. And for a painting where that's not my forte, for me to know, okay, this is like a 32-step process. I can see exactly how this arced and all of the choices along the way. I don't know what the words are, but I know conceptually what happened here. And it was hugely helpful and very fast. So.
And if I may, Rising Winds does an event every year of a best of the best. Some kingdoms do it, some kingdoms don't. I love doing that one because you're only entering one item, and I don't have to. I do a write-up with works in progress, pictures, and steps, but I get to sell it. You know, I don't have to depend on the literacy skills of judges. I have to sell it, and part of being an artist is being able to sell your wares however you can. If I have to be a game show host and put a little flair on it myself, that's fine. But at the same time, I competed against a very beautiful tunic this past time and was able to talk about the technical things that I did to make my tunic better or a step above. And sometimes it's like you have no idea what you're doing, so it's a very organic process, and I love it. Would I be able to do that here? No, but what I could have been cool is being able to do an artist statement so that the judges know where you're coming from beforehand.
Combat LARP has been brought up in a couple of panels. Yet at the same time, there's a very distinct culture of do it old school, hand sew everything, forge it, cast it yourself, and that gets more points, doesn't get more points. What are your perspectives? Does it have value? Should it have value? We'll start. Jinx.
I think you should do what looks best. If you can hand forge it, if you can do it, if you can do it by hand, then go for it. But if you can figure out the process if you need to use modern processes to make what, that's going to hold up to what we do, then go for it. It shouldn't be prohibitive if you're not interested in doing the hand finishing things. I don't think it should be that big of a deal, but I think you should make up for it in the complexity of what you do.
I've been noting, and then I'm going to come over to you, is that, again, we're talking about ANS judging. We're not talking about awards. I just want to foot stomp that. Not for you guys, but just as a reminder before this conversation goes too far.
I think that as a community, we want to start broadening our horizons, and it's something that many people saw this year with the categories for Olympiad. We had in other modern artistic and modern construction, because there are people who are getting into 3D printing, into laser cutting, into digital media, and it's becoming very popular, almost just as much so as some of the traditional and historical methods. And I think that to downplay that and to not include those artisans is doing a disservice to what we're trying to do, which is make this game vibrant and beautiful in any way that we can. So I think cutting it out entirely is wrong, and it's just a matter of thinking about things differently and getting the experience so that we're judging things appropriately and that we're staying on top of the new technologies so that we can be competitive and learn and grow from that, because there's so much out there now. 3D printers are affordable. Why would you not use that technology if you could?
Okay, so Promethea, you got a deep in thought thing going, but I'm going to steal the opportunity to talk about it from you, if you don't mind. So let's talk about how all that plays out. What do you do whenever you're judging or you're asked to judge an item that it's not in your wheelhouse?
You just ask another judge for me. You go out and you say, listen, I'm a digital artist, but I don't understand a lot of technical painting techniques. When you get really in depth, you go to another judge and say, well, I know you do this. Can you give me some pointers? What can I look for? What's the best part of this piece? What's the worst part of this piece? And get an idea of sort of how the technical skills are being used. Because just because I don't understand them doesn't mean a lot of work didn't go into a piece.
Raphael?
Well, actually, I wanted to backtrack to what you said about the last statement. Ladies, hold up your chains. All right. 2 of us have heart rings bought online from the Ring Lord. Jinx's is a old hand-me-down. I'll bet you her rings are made by hand, and so they all look the part, they all fit the bill, and that's embracing. That's as far as I'd go with embracing what's out there in terms of materials and stuff. And so we love the Ring Lord.
Yeah. We have employees of the Ring Lord in our principality.
There you go. We love the Ring Lord.
Yeah.
But
But
whenever you're asked to judge something outside of your wheelhouse.
I don't have anything on my. I'm serious. Unless they're entering welding.
Okay, then let me ask you this.
Okay.
I'm an entrant.
Okay.
How do I prepare something that I'm concerned will be outside of their wheelhouse?
Better write-up, glossary, and I like that she talked about a step-by-step. I've done that. I competed in a Crown Quals where I had 5 Serpent Knights judging, and I scored a 4.5 with the color relief reduction print. What that means is, imagine a rubber stamp. You stamp it, your first color, then you edit that and stamp it again on top of it, and every time you stamp, you're doing a lighter color to reduce and create and let the previous color come forward. I had illustrations. This was before everybody really thought about the idea of doing write-ups and stuff, and I felt stupid doing it for Serpent Knights. These are all people who are former SEA guys. A couple of them knew what they were doing, above and beyond any single category. But I wanted to make sure that they all knew exactly what they were looking at. And I even included the printing plate. And so just to make sure you cover your ass, really, and go with one step further. Cyan, cover your ass now. Don't do it later. Don't do an appeals and whine to the judges. Do it now.
Okay. So, judging. Let's talk style. Individual judging or team judging? Is there a time and place for each? Thoughts, Diana?
I really prefer individual judging. I think that team judging, you influence your scores too much. I think pretty much every tournament I've seen where judges work as a pack, you start to see the same comments, you start to see numbers with less of a spread, and that can really change how your entire score system comes out. So I think that for a second to go back to what we were saying about what do you do when it's not in your wheelhouse, I think every kingdom at this point has had a conversation at one point or another of pulling together your knowledgeable artisans and doing a write-up judging guide. I think we've been saying this for over a decade. I think it's time that we organize and get this done, because there's becoming too wide a range of discrepancy between how we judge, how we award, how we look at things that we just see on field. And I think that pulling the crafting community together and doing this sooner rather than later would be a great way to both making the judging easier, make the awarding easier, and making conversations like this be able to go in different directions. So I think that, that's where I'd go with that.
I gotta say, I'm the same way. There have been times where I've walked through and we've done team judging, and I hear somebody who's like originally complaining about the item and being like, I would score this quite low, change their mind at the end. And I think if you have a really strong feeling about it, you should have the ability to write your own score, write your own comments, and judge it as fairly as you think it should be judged.
I have to agree.
I fear it.
You fear?
I fear team judging. I fear it. Any competition I go to. I was a participant in a Texas Olympiad, to where it was very nice of them. They provided us the score sheets afterwards, and it was clear that you had 4 judges hang around each other and put the same comments on it, and one went off on her own and actually did her job, because I had people say the same thing and misspell the same words on my team one. And what I did is I was having a Christmas party with the actual winner, and we put all those crappy ones to the side and we just compared the other one, and we were like, okay, well, clearly she scored your stuff for the most part higher, to where I would have lost if all the judges did their job separately. Like, cool, thanks to this one person for being honest. All right, then the other thing is, well, I guess that's it. Stop there.
So I'm going to let Jinx finish her drink, and then I have a question for you.
Okay.
How do I not solicit for judges and stuff like that? How do I groom and grow more judges? Can I?
I think you have to groom the arts and sciences community as a whole, because the better artisans you have, the better judges you end up having. I mean, I hate to say it, the best artisans make the best judges, so it's always really hard when you need to pull 4 of them out of the pool, 5 of them out of the pool, so that they can judge. But if you've got a community of 20 to 30 crafters who are all, top of their game and teaching new people all the time, that's new judges every time someone learns something. It's a new judge.
having to go through. Okay, everybody's from a roaming crown, correct? Okay,
Not originally.
I know. Your perspective is going to be real interesting here.
Okay, home of the static crown.
I hear all these conversations about differences between judging at I don't want to say subordinate land, but a smaller land versus a larger land or a kingdom event. Promethea, explain it to me.
I think there's there's a certain part of it that I find when I go to a smaller group, you don't see as wide of a range of materials. Like, you'll see the best that like a few of their crafters have to offer, and it's hard to visualize what the best in that field looks like. So you might score things better at a smaller park, or like you're, as an officer, you might go to a smaller park and help with how about that. You'll score something higher than you would normally at an Olympiad, where you'll be more critical because you're not able to see everything all together. And I would say that's one of the drawbacks of having a roaming crown system, is that you can't as often put your artisans in one place and get a sense of the scope of what your kingdom can do.
Raphael, I know you've competed at every level multiple times, every scenario. Your thoughts?
A whole lot. Can you go to somebody else real quick?
All right, we're making notes.
I think that it also would be very discouraging if you're looking at the scale, and the scale stayed the same from an interkingdom event down to a shire level event. If I were in a shire and everyone was getting no higher than a 3 or a 4 on a 10 scale, everyone's going to be discouraged. You're not actually growing, and you're not encouraging those people. They don't have a perspective from within their own world, their own worldview. They might not even be traveling out to kingdoms. They have no idea what the score above them looks like. So it's not a very positive and encouraging environment. So you want to soften that expectation a little bit, I would argue, on that level. And then as they grow and as they say, okay, so I'm doing really well at my local park level, I'm going to start entering my interkingdom event or my kingdom events. And then when they start doing well at the kingdom events, they're going to start entering interkingdom. And that person's got a great path of development as long as they're getting that really good judging. So I think that to score people the same way we did this weekend at a shire level, I think would be doing them a disservice. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like we have to kind of adjust our perspective and our expectations.
Okay. You say something. Raphael.
I won't enter at my group level.
What's your group level?
My group level now is a duchy.
Okay.
I won't do it. Mainly because we have a system that you can enter at your duchy level and the same item in the principality level, and I disagree with that. I'm also a reigning dragon master of the Polaris, so I will defend that title till they remove it from my cold dead hands. But so I won't enter. I don't believe in double dipping with items except for Dragon Master and Crown Qualls. Okay. But I never entered a Dragon Master until I moved up to St. Paul. Burning Lands didn't have it. It was, if you wanted to show off your wares, you did it twice a year, not 4 times. And you entered with people who are doing crown qualifications. And if you won that, you were considered the arts and science champion for the reign. You were a Dragon Master. That was it. And so it encouraged more at less times a year. And I like that. So moving up here, it's different. And then plus the best of the best, it gives you more and more opportunity to shine. It also sometimes it gives opportunities for the same thing to show up, and then people get tired of it. And so as a judge, one year I heard the Viking prayer 5 times. I got really tired of it.
Jinx, Dragon Master, Crown Qualls, different scale, same scale? Wow.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the main difference is the judges who are judging qualifications need to really enforce really need to understand what is average. I think it's more important for them to understand that's not exactly what I wanted to say at all. They should be relatively the same, but I feel like the entries that generally get turned into Dragon Master are higher than what they would be in qualifications, at least from what I've seen in my kingdom. A lot of times qualifications in the Rising Winds tend to be more, there are a bunch of people running, so there are already going to be a bunch of entries, and people don't want their beautiful items that they've spent a ton of time making getting lost in the mix of everyone's items that have to go in. So
what I'm hearing is it's almost not so much the judge expectation, but the entrance expectations.
right.
You know, if you're entering Crown Qualls and you're thinking that this is my Dragon Master winning item, that it's going to get a 4 or 5 depending on the scale.
Yeah.
You need to know what the judges are going to be, what lens they're going to be using. Is that
Right.
a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. Promethea, did you want to add to that? Okay.
I just think qualifying score, setting the expectation of what the particular tournament is looking for, quals are not meant to be some crazy hurdle. It's meant to be, do you know enough about the game to be in charge of a park? That's really what it is. So I think that the passing score, the expectant score, should be just, can we trust you to be a resource for other people? And then Dragon Master, we're looking for our best artisans. So as long as you go in with the right expectations, I think that having not necessarily having to quantify it, but having that in the back of your mind as an entrant, as a judge, that's all that we really need.
Okay. The people in attendance haven't been tossing cards up, so I'm sort of digging in the recent Facebook ANS Anonymous discussions for my questions here. So first off, please feel free to throw a question our way via the 3x5 card. But first time entry, does it matter to you as a judge? Should it matter to you as a judge? Diana looks excited, so we're going to start with Raph.
Awesome. First time entry, your excitement level should be high just because, you've decided to make that leap. Some people, because we're up here and we have Crown Qualls and Dragon Master, some people beta test it in Crown Qualls before they enter it in Dragon Master. And some people might actually beta test it in Dragon Master before they qualify because they might want to see what they need to do so they can be prepared in Crown Qualls so there's no surprises. There's nothing that sucks worse than being up at 3 o'clock in the morning having to go to Walmart and buy a spool of thread and rope for the next day for Crown Qualls. And if you're prepared 2-3 months in advance, it's good to go. So it's cool to be able to have those platforms. So I dig it.
But does it influence your score? If somebody writes on their well-detailed entry card,
okay,
that it's their first time.
No, pisses me off. I've seen illegal swords actually win weapon construction because they wrote first attempt. Thank you. First attempt, and judges are like, oh, isn't that cool? No, it sucks. An illegal weapon should score at 0, and they've passed it, and like, oh yeah, great thing. And so that's a red flag for me. First attempt.
Jinx,
no.
Does it influence your score? Should it?
Not really. If they're entering it, they obviously are. If you're entering an item, you are trying to get the feedback, and you want to see what your score. You want to see your score, and you want to get your feedback, so you can increase your knowledge and do better in your next projects. But it doesn't really affect. To me, it doesn't really affect a score one way or another if it's your first try, because there's always room for improvement. Like, you can always make a prettier tunic.
Well, of course, but what I understood is he said if you put first attempt on your right, don't do that.
No, but there's always room. Like, everyone can always do better, so it shouldn't matter if it's your first. There should always be a next try, or a next item.
I'm kind of a soft touch. Like, if they write down that it's their first time in a medium, and I know them from other mediums, I admit that I'm inclined to look at that and be like, I can't believe that they're doing X. I can't believe they're doing jewelry making when they've only been making tunics up until this point. And I admit that does influence my score a little bit if it's on there. It's not intentional, but I think there's a certain sort of like projected excitement. They're like, this is my first time working with this, and if the piece turns out well, it's just that much more interesting and impressive. Like, the skill level for me is like, what are you gonna do now when you practice that thing? I get a little bit excited about it.
Yeah.
So number of times in the medium, I feel like it does two things. One, if it's your first try and it doesn't go off well, you've just sold yourself short to me. So it's just like saying on your entry, I know I made this mistake, or please don't look at this, or didn't get to iron it. If you tell me that, I'm a judge. That's all I'm gonna see when I look at the entry now. So saying this is my first time, oh, you've never done this before, clearly you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's gonna affect how I look at it. It's gonna affect how I think of it. To kind of cap on that, I also similarly, and this came up in ANS Anonymous, when you start talking about hours spent and money spent, they're pet peeves of mine, because if you say them without saying anything else, it makes me really angry. If you say I spent 42 hours and it did really, really amazing things, I still don't know how that 42 hours was divvied up. Did you spend a ton of time on design, and because you did such a brilliant job with your design, the entry came together like that? Or did it take you 42 hours because you aren't familiar with this art form and it just took you that long? So that time can't be impressive to me without some explanation of what happened in that time. Same thing with cost. I know people, even in this entry, who did garbing on a shoestring, like minimal budget. You tell me you spent, $1,800 on your entry. Okay, that could be really great if you've got really high quality materials and you tell me what they are and what that means. But on the flip side, if you spent that, and I know you could have done it for half the cost, again, you're selling yourself short to your judges. So when you're putting down those kinds of details, be very careful, be very specific, and never ever sell yourself short to the judge. They're going to find the plot holes, they're going to find the errors. Don't do it for them.
Raphael,
Yes, sir.
just so everybody's aware, these are going to have to sort of be onesies and twosies in order for us to get the most out of the time. Multiple time officer,
Yep.
multiple time judge, artisan. Does your score in your mind translate to an award or vice versa?
No.
I'm sorry?
No. Because you could always have a messed up judge. All right. You could have a guy who's going out there to tank some and boost others, and it's like, okay, so did the winner actually win? That's up to the regent, the monarch to decide. All right.
Okay. Jinx, similar multiple time award. Oh, different question though. From a small part, should I be entering the kingdom level ANS? What do I use to decide if I'm ready to compete at kingdom or not?
I think if it's your first time entering, I think you should take your items, and I think you should take your write-ups, and I think you should, if you're confident in your items, you should enter them if you want to. And if nothing else, you will get that critique back. That being said, you should also be ready to go to your kingdom weapon or dragon master and say, this is the deep end, and go through and look at all the entries and see what's there, and maybe pull an artisan aside and say, how do I get better? So I think it's all about the learning. Like, I will always like both sides of it. So
Diana, how do we decide ties in an ANS competition? Have you ever been in that situation? How did you resolve it?
So it depends a bit on how the system is designed. There are some cases where you can break ties by looking at, so on an averaging system, if the averages come out the same, but who did more entries? You can look at a simple system like that. If it's something like a ranking system and they just managed to rank up the same number of points, you can look at the number of categories they won. You can look at high score if it's a ranking system. Things like best in show choices. So it's very dependent on the structure of the tournament.
So is it best to make sure that that's addressed
Yes.
while you're coming up with your rule set?
Absolutely.
We talked about transparency. Promethea, I think you mentioned it, so we're going to start with you. Should your name be associated with your score and comments?
I'm a fan of blind judging, so I really prefer I think I've had issues in the past where things that I have entered have been marked lower than they were being marked in other, like you enter something at like the local level for Crown Calls, enter it again at like a best of the best competition. And I've had the marks change dramatically when my name was associated with it. I feel that having your name off of it just makes
As
you
an
focus.
entry?
Yes.
Okay.
Having your name off of the piece makes the judges focus more on the piece, and that's really where it should be. It should not be about you in any way. It's nice to know the artisan and be excited again about them, but the most important thing is like the piece. Your name doesn't matter.
What if I flip that? What about judges? Should that be kept anonymous as well, or should we
Yeah.
associate names?
I prefer when everything is blind, because I like that way you make sure the judges are on a level playing field too. They don't know who they're dealing with, and they'll just judge things fairly.
All right, the last question is bringing up controversy. Diana, what are your thoughts?
I like the idea of the judges' names being on there because it holds them accountable. It means that you can't, like we were talking about earlier, you have that judge who's going in to tank someone. If they tank someone, their name is on it. Everyone is going to see. If they tank someone and all the other judges' scores are vastly higher and they can't give you a critique, a legitimate, visible critique, arts is tangible. If you can see it, then you can say, well, maybe low high should have been dropped. Maybe we have a judge who's more than just a Russian judge. So I think it makes artisans a bit more confident going in because they know if something happens, they can talk to that person, or they can talk to the person running the event and say, can you reach out to this judge? I'm not sure I can confront them about this, but I feel that this is not reasonable or fair and I want more information from them.
Okay. Jinx?
I think that I think that entries should be blind, like the entrance should be blind. I think the judges should be known, at least to the person organizing, so if something does come up, they can go back and look at it. I'm a huge fan of knowing who the judges are. Like, I really think that transparency helps, and being able to go back and go through your comments and be able to say, this person gave me really good comments. They can probably show me a lot of good stuff, or they can point me in the direction of someone that can show me what to do. So that's what they're for.
Oh, sorry.
That's what they're for.
I'd go anonymous but trackable. I've had an instance when before the Principality, before Polaris, to where I tanked some scores and they were like, oh, Raph's just an asshole, we'll throw his low scores out, keep the high ones and the mid ones, but throw out the low ones. And it's like, oh, that's great. But when I run things, I color code it. I won't tell them who my judges are, but I know, okay, like Jinx would be the red one, Deidre would be the blue, and they would have those color pens. And so I could go back and actually say, like, okay, I know which one she had and what color she had, so I can go back and make sure. So I'm like, oh, but somebody's taking it, I can go find them. And that'd be my system.
Okay. An odd point, and I'm just going to use this opportunity to bring up, is sort of saw some of the answers when we were talking about the kingdom and the different levels of competition and stuff like that. One thing I would just encourage everybody, and I think this would be echoed by each of you, is there's nothing wrong with bringing up an item and asking input from an artisan you respect.
Right.
And I don't think we do that often enough. And sometimes that might be the safer way to do it. So if someone's not interested in throwing it out to the wolves of the kingdom or higher level thing, finding an artisan you respect and sitting down with them can probably be more valuable than a score. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
I'd like to expand from the first one.
Okay,
first
but
panel.
we've only got seconds.
Okay,
so
that's fine. That's where your regent comes in play. Ask your regent, and then maybe she can point you to the right guy.
Matchmaker kind of deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say one of the things that got me excited this weekend, and in my own personal experience, what I love about going to a tournament is meeting the other artisans and then making friends and then keeping in touch and joining the crafting games challenge together. Or when you're setting, like at Olympiad in Neverwinter, I met Donnie Darko and we were competing head to head, and I loved his work. And there was this belt he had made for Gun, and I was just so in love with it. And then, 2 years later, when I got my belt, all of a sudden this belt shows up in Golden Vale from Donnie, and it's a belt like what he had made for Gun years before when we met. Like that friendship, and then we talk, and whenever I'm working on a new project, I'll shoot him a line and say, hey, how's it going? What are you working on these days? And you meet these people from all over the game, and it will help you grow as a crafter, as an artisan, when you're talking to them and saying, okay, I'm upping my game. What do you think I should do next? Or if they're just there to encourage you. And this weekend I saw some crafters who've never met before rubbing elbows and talking about their next projects. And I'm just watching the gears in their heads as they go, great, this is someone I can talk to. I'm not a leather worker, but they do leather, and they're going to be able to give me some pointers. And it's like pen pals. It's fun.
Anybody want to add to that? Okay, we have to wrap things up. So, Jinx, again, I'm going to start with you. Takeaways, last opportunities to address the audience, thoughts, considerations, wisdom.
I don't have wisdom. Just be fair, but be tough. Be honest. Like, if you're not doing anyone favors by being dishonest with your judging. Like, it's hurting the community as a whole to be a crappy judge. So be a good judge, and it'll help everyone not be crappy.
Diana?
We have, as a community, been doing things in the same way for a long time. We have a lot of systems and traditions that we hold true, and I think there are a lot of new forms and new ideas that people are a little bit afraid to embrace. And I got a lot of constructive criticism and flack and feedback from this year's Design for Olympiad, and I know it was different, and I know it was weird and complicated and strange, but I think that we need to start considering other options, because as we get new categories, as we get new artisans, we're going to have to look at new systems, and there's nothing wrong with working on that and trying to improve where we are missing the mark in some places.
Raphael?
I'm gonna expand from Jinx. Thank you. Look up Truth of the Commons on Wikipedia, and go find on Spotify Dark Side by Tom Stoppard. And if you make the connection about Amtgard with it, you're one step ahead.
If not, we're going to find you on Facebook and ask you about it.
Right, and then I'll encourage you to listen to it again.
Promethea.
I think the whole thing comes down to like just more honesty and transparency, because the worst thing, the best part about being in a community like this is there are so many talented people who are there to teach you skills, and the worst thing about being in this community is that there are so many people who are talented and want to teach you skills and really like to nitpick your work publicly or privately. And I think the more we have communication, the more we have things like last year doing judge mentoring to teach new judges, the more we encourage people to enter a little bit outside of the box and like do some other stuff, the more they get real good judging, the more they're going to want to compete, and the more encouraged they're going to be, and the better work we're going to see. It all just plays into itself. So the fairer you are, the better.
I think that's a great way to close it up. Again, please, a round of applause for our panel members. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your event to spend it with us and share some of your insight. And thank you.